In 1974, 3-car bombs ripped through Dublin in 90 seconds, then a fourth hit Monaghan an hour later. 34 people died, including a full-term unborn child. It remains the single deadliest day of the entire Troubles. You were never taught this. There's a reason, and the reason is darker than the bombings themselves. May 17, 1974. A Friday. Rush hour. Not Belfast. Not some border town soaked in decades of violence. This was Dublin, the capital of the Republic of Ireland, a place people believed was insulated from the war up north. Talbot Street, Parnell Street, South Leinster Street. 3 bombs, no warnings, packed with commuters and shoppers. 90 minutes later, a fourth bomb detonated in Monaghan town near the border. 258 people were injured. The death toll was worse than Bloody Sunday, worse than Omagh, and almost nobody outside Ireland has ever heard of it. The Ulster Volunteer Force, a loyalist paramilitary group, eventually claimed responsibility, eventually meaning 1993. 19 years of silence first. For nearly 2 decades, the Irish government offered no real answers, no public inquiry, no arrests. Not one person has ever been charged. Not one. In a country where everyone knew everyone's business, where a car being stolen made the local papers, 4 synchronized bombs killed 34 people and the trail simply went cold. Investigators later admitted key forensic evidence was lost. Files went missing from Garda archives. Witnesses were interviewed once briefly and never followed up. The case wasn't unsolved. It was unpursued. Then it gets stranger. In 2003, an Irish government-commissioned inquiry, the Barron Report, found something that should have been front-page news for a generation. Credible evidence suggested British security forces, specifically intelligence figures linked to MI5 and elements of the British Army, had foreknowledge of loyalist bombing capability, and in some cases, direct operational links to the men who built the devices. Not just failed to stop it, possibly enabled it. The report described a vested interest on both sides of the Irish Sea in the investigation going nowhere. On both sides. Meaning Dublin, too, had reasons to let it stay buried. But here's what doesn't add up. If this was simply loyalist paramilitaries acting alone, angry, violent, but independent, why would British intelligence files relevant to the case still be classified, decades later, under national security grounds? National security from what? The men accused of building the bombs were named publicly by journalists years ago. They're not secret. So what exactly is still being protected, if not the bombers? Here's the buried why. Northern Ireland in 1974 wasn't just a sectarian street war. It was a covert intelligence battlefield, and British security services were running networks of paramilitary informants, some of them, according to later testimony, given operational cover to continue attacks in exchange for intelligence. It's a pattern investigators call collusion. Handlers protecting assets, assets committing atrocities. If the Dublin Monaghan bombers were among those protected informants, then prosecuting them wouldn't just convict 4 men. It would expose a British intelligence architecture built on tolerating loyalist terrorism, as long as it served the larger fight against the IRA. That's not a scandal about one bombing. That's a scandal about the entire shape of the conflict, decades of the Troubles, reframed not as chaos, but as a war partly managed from the shadows. Dublin buried it because a small, exposed republic didn't want a diplomatic war with London. London buried it because the alternative was admitting its own hands weren't clean. 2 governments, 1 silence, and 34 bodies caught in the middle. Think about what that means for everything else you were taught about this period. If one of the deadliest attacks of the entire conflict was quietly smothered by 2 governments working in unspoken agreement, what does that say about the version of the Troubles you actually learned? A clean narrative, Republicans versus Loyalists, a tragic tribal feud starts to look like packaging. A story simple enough to teach, simple enough to move past. The Justice for the Forgotten campaign, run by survivors' families, has spent over 30 years demanding the British government release the remaining classified files. As of now, they still haven't. So ask yourself, Why would a government keep files sealed on a decades-old car bombing where the alleged killers are already publicly named? What's left to protect, if not the truth about who was really pulling the strings?